So I am Ashutosh Kumar. I am a national coordinator for EPG Pathshala in the subject of political science. So let us start this module. If you go by the content of the module, which is titled, as I told you, Center-State Relations, the first question which comes to our mind, that what do we mean by federal polity? Because we all know that India is considered as a federal polity. But if you go through the Constitution of India, nowhere the term federalism appears. It has always been the union. So it's an Indian union. So why the term union was used and why not the term federalism was used? This needs to be explained. You know, explaining this in the Constituent Assembly, Ambedkar said that the term union has been used deliberately and not the federal because to emphasize over the more powers being given to the center. And he made a distinction between the Indian federal polity and the US federal polity. As we all know, US is a federal country. In fact, USA, Canada, Switzerland, Australia, they are considered as the classical example of federal polities. So, making a distinction between the US federal polity and Indian federal polity, Ambedkar said that in America, in US, the federation is, the union is, or the federation is indestructible. But the states are also indestructible. But in India, the states are destructible. Under Article 3 and 4, the parliament can create a new state and alter the boundary of the state. So that is not the case with US. And second, Ambedkar said that in India, the Indian Federation came into existence not as a result of an agreement signed by the federal unit, which was not the case with the American Federation. In America, we all know that the independent states like California, Texas, they came together, they signed an agreement surrendering their sovereignty and creating United States of America. Whereas in India, the Indian Federation came into existence, Indian Union came into existence as a result of Indian Independence Act 1947 passed by the British Parliament. So Ambedkar made this important distinction between the US Federation and the Indian Union. One, as I said, that the Indian Union is indestructible, but the states are destructible. So no state can secede from India, no part of India can secede from India, but the center or the Indian government, the central government can create a new state and alter the boundary of the state and even abolish a state, right? So that is one distinction. And the second, that Indian Federation came as a result of Indian Independence Act. So by that, the British monarch devolved the sovereign power to the Indian Union. And Indian Union has created the states. It's not that the states have created the Indian Union, as I referred Article 3 and 4. Now, when we refer to India before independence, when India was under the colonial regime, India consisted of two kinds of India. One was British India, which had the provinces, and there was another India, which was princely states. Princely states were also of different types. There was a hierarchy, large princely states, smaller princely states. The hierarchy was also among the Indian monarch, Indian rulers. In the princely states, some rulers were given more respect in the hierarchy than other princely states. So after independence, there was a kind of a Indian Federation, and if we refer to the Constitution of India, we find that in India, the constitution makers were very aware about the diversities in India in terms of culture, in terms of language, in terms of diverse interest, the topographical differences, so even the quality of the soil changes from every miles, the language changes, there are dialect communities, so linguistic differences, religious differences, racial differences, all kind of differences have been there, and the constitution makers were very clear that all these diverse interests and also the different regions, like if you refer to Article 38, Directive Principles of the State Policy, it says that not only the difference among the classes but also difference among the regions within India should be done away with, and there should be a kind of a redistribution of the resources. India, you can argue that federation was not really an option. It was a necessity to address the issue of the differences. And in fact, Indian Constitution stands out for not only recognizing the difference, but also accommodating the difference, and also for giving representation to the difference, whether it's a kind of 8th schedule where the Indian languages are mentioned, and now there are 22 languages starting from 14 languages, so and the list can be further extended. Then you have the rights and all. So this is something, federalism is to address the different communities, different regions, to different interests within the Indian polity, because federalism as an idea, federalism as a process is essentially for shared sovereignty, shared sense of power. So that has been always there. Now when we discuss about the Constitution of India, the Indian Constitution makes a very unique case about federal polity. Indian polity is a federal polity because if you go by the essential features of a federal polity, Indian polity fulfills all those features. For example, in India we have a written constitution, we have a dual government, we also have division of powers, and we also have independent judiciary. So all these four features, whether you refer to dual government, division of powers, independent judiciary, written constitution, so Indian polity qualifies as a federal polity. But there are many features which are not really truly federal. For example, on India services, the way the subjects have been divided, more subjects have been given to the center. Also the emergency provisions, when there is an emergency, the center becomes all powerful. The division of the subjects becomes superfluous. So all those things are there. Now if you trace the lineage of the kind of constitutional development in India, you can go back to, say, 1919, when the Directory dual government was established. Federal list was created where the subjects were there which were for the central government. Then there were the provincial list where the subjects were kept under the jurisdiction of the provinces, and then there was a concurrent list. So this Montagu-Chelmsford reforms 1919 very much prepared the ground for the three lists of the subjects and the division of the subjects between the provinces and the... Though because there was a kind of colonial government, so many powers, many subjects were kept reserved under the jurisdiction of the governor. So there was a transferred list, transferred subjects and the reserved subjects. So Darki, and then you have this 1909 provincial autonomy provision was there. So 1919 Act as well as 1909 Act, they really paved the way for a kind of federal polity, and which was followed up by the Constituent Assembly members. Now, if you read the federal polity, please understand that there were many features which really compelled, there were many factors which compelled the constitution makers to go for a strong federal government. Which were the factors which led the constitution makers to go for a strong center or a strong federal government at the cost of the state government? One would be like the food crisis. As you remember, if you have read the history book, as late as in 1943, there was a food crisis in West Bengal. Then there was also this sense of history that whenever the center has been weak, India has been attacked from outside, India has faced the external threat. So there was always insistence on making the center strong. Then there was also this feeling, because India adopted this planning model, planned economy model, development planning model. So it was thought that the center should play an important role in shaping the economy of India, supervising and formulating the policies. Then there was also a factor like the Congress party being the dominant party. Congress party was dominating both at the center as well as at the state level. So in that sense, it was inevitable that the center would play a very important role, because the same party was at the state level and at the central level, and the same party was dominant in the Constituent Assembly after the departure of Muslim League after partition. So it was, the Constituent Assembly was in fact completely dominated by the Congress party. So that would be another factor why the center would be made so strong. And then there was the colonial legacy also, that the central government was always, as I referred, under either 1909 Act or 1919 Act, 1935 Act, there was always insistence on more powers to be given to this center. 1935 provincial autonomy was given, but then the center retained most important subjects under its jurisdiction. So whether you refer to the food crisis, you refer to the need to have a planned economic development, or to think about the unity and integrity of India, the territorial unity and integrity of India, which figures security of India, which again and again figure in the Constitution. Whether you refer to the preamble, you refer to the Article 19, Article 25, and the other provisions of the Constitution, it was thought that there should be a strong center which would act as a kind of magnet to keep the different parts of India together and to check the possible balkanization of the country. This viewpoint that the center should be given more power, and that's why you have like All India Services, you have the Election Commission having the jurisdiction all over India, the Comptroller and Auditor General of India having jurisdiction all over India, and you also have the President power to remove a Public Service Commission member, to appoint and remove the state, the High Court judges and all. So all these powers, basically, they are not really, or the state emergency under Article 356, so these powers which have been given to the center, basically they are seen as interference with the state government, and they really put a question mark about Indian federal structure. So we can say that in India, we have a quasi-federal structure, or we can say that Indian federal system, as Alfred Stephen and Yogendra Yadav, and they all have argued, Ashutosh Varshney also argues that India is not a nation state, but India is a state nations. So India is a state which has several nations, right? So multicultural, multinational state, you can say, considering the presence of so many ethnic communities and linguistic communities in India. In fact, India, you can refer to the different kind of communities as Ashutosh Varshney argues, like the tribe, caste. These are the these are the important social groups, tribe, caste, religion. These are the important groups. In India, the constitution makers basically got a federal polity for India, which under the normal circumstances would remain federal, but if there is an emergency situation under Article 352, the Indian state for all practical purposes becomes a unitary state, because under Article 352 the President can issue the direction to the state government. Even with regard to the state subject, the Union Parliament can make law, gets the concurrent power to legislate on any state subject, and even the money bill and all that has to be reserved for the consideration of the President if there is a financial emergency under Article 360. And as far as the 356 is concerned, the state government can be dismissed, and during the state emergency, the legislative power of the state gets vested in the institution of the Parliament. Parliament can make law with regard to the state which is under the state emergency. So we have a position in India where we have a federal polity, but the federal polity is such that all the center has got the overriding powers. Like, just refer certain few constitutional articles quickly to get a kind of idea about how the powers have been distributed between the center and the state. Let us take first the legislative relations between the center and the state. Part 11 of the Constitution of India and Article 245 to 255 refers to the distribution of the legislative powers between the center and the state. Article 245 says that Parliament can make law with regard to the whole of the country or a part of the country, whereas, as we all know, state legislature can only make law with regard to the state within the territorial boundary of the state. Article 246 is very important because it is wide Article 246 that you have 7th schedule, which divides the subjects into the three lists: union list, state list, and the concurrent list. And remember, the residuary powers are with the center, not with the state. So this is unlike USA. In USA, the residuary subjects, the subjects which are not mentioned in the list, they are with the states in US. But in India, it is with the center. So in fact, you can say that in India, all those subjects which are not mentioned in the second list, that is the state list, they are under the jurisdiction of the center. Because though the state legislature and the state government can make law, and law, as you know, under Article 13, law can also include the ordinance, law can include the rules, bylaws and all. It's not only the legislative law. So the state government can make law with regard to the concurrent subject, but at the same time, union government and also union parliament can also make law with regard to the concurrent subject. And if there is a conflict between the two, between the central law and the state law, it would be the central law that shall prevail over the state law. So there you have a clear-cut upper hand given to the center with regard to the distribution of the legislative powers. Then we also know that, as I said, under Article 248, all the subjects which are not mentioned in the list 1, that is union list, list 2, that is a state list, list 3, which is concurrent list, all those subjects which are not mentioned in any of the three lists, the power to legislate on those subjects would be lined with the union government. So then you have some very contentious article, that is 249, and you also have other 250 also. So let us discuss 249. See, even if there is no emergency, neither the national emergency nor the state emergency, though the constitution only mention emergency. So if there is no emergency under Article 352 or under 356, even then, if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by a special majority, that is 2/3 members present and voting, and that number should be more than half of the total strength of the House. So if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution by a special majority that it is in the national interest, that the parliament be empowered to make a law on a state subject, then within 1 year from the date of the passing of that resolution, parliament may or may not make law on a state subject. For example, just take an example like forestry is a fisheries is a state subject, right? So fisheries or say sales tax used to be a state subject. So if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution that the parliament be empowered to make a law with regard to fisheries, then if the union parliament wants, it can have a law on sales tax or on a fisheries, and that would be applicable to all the states, even if there is no emergency. And this law shall prevail 6 months after the completion of 1 year from the date of the passing of that resolution by the Rajya Sabha. I say again, see, if the Rajya Sabha passes a resolution that it is in the national interest that the parliament be empowered to make a law on a state subject, then within 1 year from the date of the passing of that resolution, if the parliament wishes, it can make a law on that state subject, right? After 2 months, after 4 months, whatever. And once a law is made by the parliament on that particular state subject, that would be applicable to all the states. And how long that law would be applicable? That law shall be applicable for 6 months after the completion of 1 year from the date, which date? The date of the passing of the resolution by the Rajya Sabha, right? So suppose if it is say 15th December 2017, then it would be 15th December 2018 and plus 6 months, right? So that would be the time period for the this thing. So 249 is very much resented by the states because it is seen as an infringement in the rights of the states. Then you have 250, as I said, that when there is a proclamation of emergency, then under Article 250, the Parliament can legislate on any of the part of the territory or any or the whole of the country. And this law shall be operative till the parliament makes a law taking away that law. 252 is also very important. 252 says if two or more state legislatures pass a resolution by simple majority. Here see, there is no provision of a special majority. So if it passes by a simple majority, two or more, so it can't be one. So two or more state legislature, if they pass a resolution by simple majority, that the union parliament be empowered to make a law on any matter which falls in the state list, any subject which falls within the state list, then if the parliament wishes, it can make law with regard to that subject, and that law shall be applicable to those 2 states or 3 states or 4 states. If, say, a law has been enacted under Article 252 for those 2 states, if the 3rd state also wishes to extend that law to its own state, suppose like Punjab and Haryana, they have passed a resolution and the Union Parliament made a law that was applicable to Punjab and Haryana. If Himachal Pradesh also wants a similar law being applicable to Himachal Pradesh, what Himachal Pradesh legislature has to do is to pass a resolution by simple majority to this effect. So 252 is also there. 253, as you know, the Indian government goes for any treaty making, so there may be need to make any law to make that treaty applicable, and there like the Indian state, as you know, the treaty making power, the foreign affairs, that falls within the jurisdiction of the union government, doesn't fall within the jurisdiction of the state government. In order to implement, in order to enforce the treaty as per the conditions and the provisions of the treaty, the parliament under Article 253 can make law. 254 is very clear, as I told you earlier also, that if there is a conflict between the state law and the central law, to the extent the state law is in conflict with the central law, that would be considered unconstitutional. So there again you can see that it would be the central law that shall prevail and the state law shall be declared as null and void. Not unconstitutional really, null and void. So that is there. Now when we refer to administrative relation between the center and the state, how do we explain the administrative relation between the center and the state? Remember, the Union President, the President of India, can issue the direction under Article 257 to the state government to safeguard the railway, to safeguard the waterways, to safeguard the communication which have a high strategic importance, high strategic value. We can also refer to the under Article 257 that the Union Executive can give direction to the state government with regard to the matters which falls within the jurisdiction of the union government. As you know, under Article 365, Constitution says that it shall be the duty of the union government to see that the state are following the provisions of the Constitution. So, if the union government gives a direction to the state government within its jurisdiction under Article 257, like protection of the railway or protection of the national highways or the waterways or the communication, or union government give the direction to the state government with regard to the matters which falls within the union government jurisdiction, and if the state government does not follow that direction, then the union government can surmise that a situation has arisen that is tantamount to the failure of the constitutional order, and then the Council of Ministers can refer the matter to the President under Article 356 for the imposition of the President rule. And we have also discussed that how under Article 352, when there is an emergency, national emergency, the central government can issue the direction to the state government, even not only with regard to the central subjects or the union subjects, but also with regard to the state subject. And the state government has to follow that. So you can see that whether like you can refer to like another factor which is very important and that is becoming more and more important, that is with regard to the distribution of the interstate river water. And there the parliament can make a law under Article 262 with regard to the interstate river water, and that can be made immune from the judicial review. So 262 is also very important, because whenever there is a here you can refer like 131 is also there, the Supreme Court having the original jurisdiction to deal with the dispute between the center and the state. But here what you find is that if the two states like Punjab and Haryana having the problem with the Satluj Yamuna river water distribution, or this Karnataka and Tamil Nadu have the problem Kaveri river water dispute, on such matters the Union Parliament can simply make a law, and that law would be applicable to the concerned states. So this is also very clear. Now when we refer to the financial matter, which is also becoming very important, right now what we have is that most of the taxation power, the most lucrative taxation power is with the center. That ensures that the states are always dependent on the center. You have the three bodies like the Finance Commission, National Development Council, and then the Planning Commission. They all Planning Commission has now become the Niti Aayog. So when you refer to the center-state financial relation, the center has been always financially very strong, and the states have been dependent on the central grants for carrying out the policy, carrying out the schemes. But of late, you can see that there has been a change in the sense that the states have got more and more autonomy, and the states have got more and more power to invest, to get the investment on their own. And that way you can see that there is a qualitative change in the center-state relation with regard to the financial matter. There's a greater distribution also. The center is now sharing 42% of the total grants to the states. Under the new economic policy, you can say that now the center-state financial relation has become much better. Now we come to the tension between the center and state, and as I said, that debates and the tension between the center and the state has been very much there, and that's why you have had Sarkariyat Commission, Punchi Commission, there have been two center-state relations commissions to examine the center-state relations, and both commissions did not really come out with recommendations for substantive change in the constitution, but they all really emphasized over the fact that Article 356, state emergency, should not be used until unless there is a exceptional situation. Likewise, there has been an issue of the asymmetric federalism, and especially with regard to the special constitutional status being given to Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370. And as you know, we have 5th schedule and 6th schedule also. There are 4 states which are mentioned in the 6th schedule. They are from the tribal areas, the northeastern states like the Nagaland, Meghalaya, and Mizoram. These are the states like, and even like when you refer to 73rd and 74th constitutional amendment, the modern panchayats which came into existence in 1993, and the Amendment Acts 73rd and 74th were passed in 1992. They are not applicable to Nagaland and Meghalaya and Mizoram. So all these states, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Mizoram and all, they are mentioned in the 6th schedule. And then you have the 5th schedule, the district autonomous councils and the hill area council and all. So asymmetric federalism, these areas have been given a special constitutional status and the constitutional provisions. There has been this debate that why special constitutional status being given to Jammu and Kashmir. Has this asymmetric federalism led to the tendency for secessionism? So does it really weaken? Do these asymmetrical provisions which are applicable to northeastern states and to Jammu and Kashmir, do they lead to weakening of the national unity and national integration? And do they incentivize or promote the secessionist tendencies in these northeastern states and in Jammu and Kashmir? So this has been again a very debatable issue. The office of the governor has been very much debatable because governors have been seen very partisan and governors have not been seen as impartial. They have been seen as agents of the center. So there have been several recommendations from Sarkaria Commission as well as Punchi Commission that how there should be a harmonious relationship between the governor and the chief minister or the government. And local self-government also, when you refer to the Panchayati Raj system and all, there is a lot of problems with that also, because when you consider the local government as the third tier of the federal polity and really promoting the grassrootization of the democracy in India, most of the panchayat bodies, there have been variance across the states. In some states, the panchayat bodies have done better. In other states, panchayat institutions have simply been mostly ineffective. Why it has been so? There is a problem about financial resources. There has been an unwillingness on the part of the state government to share power with the panchayat bodies. So this is also, despite all kind of effort, the center-state relations. But one thing I can say to you, and that is that though constitutionally there has not been much amendment, but in the actual terms, on the ground level, the states are becoming more and more autonomous. States are getting a kind of autonomous space in the economic arena. There is a less use of Article 356, as you saw in the case of Arunachal Pradesh, as well as in the case of Uttarakhand. The judiciary, the Supreme Court, as well as the High Court, they have come hard. They have taken very strong position that the provision under Article 356, that is the provision for the imposition of the president rule, should not be misused by the center. There has been also attempt that the center should not interfere in the affairs of the states. So right now there is a greater recognition that we should have not only a strong center, but we should also have a strong states, and there should be a real cooperative federal structure in India. I hope that you gained from this module, you have a better understanding now to understand. And so when we refer to the center-state relations, it's not that we should only refer to the constitutional provisions which remain more or less intact, but we should also see the ground reality. And the ground reality is that the states are emerging in a big way. They are becoming a kind of platform where the politics and economy is unfolding, and with the rise of the state parties, with the rise of the coalition government, now we have a much better relationship between the center and the state, much better coordination between the center and the state. And the onus of this responsibility lies with both the states and the center to maintain a harmonious relation. Only then the federal polity can work better. And as I said at the outset, that there is no other alternative. India cannot really simply be a unitary state like Great Britain. Because of the diversities in India, India is bound to have a federal polity to give the citizens a feeling of a shared power, shared sovereignty. Thank you very much.